My name is Connor Farah. I'm going to be giving a brief summary of my problem and solution report for Management 333 Organizational Communication with Miss Jessica McDill. So, the problem that I chose to write about for my summary, for my report, was one that I believe is very relevant today, especially in our culture in America. That problem is the excessive use of screen time in teenagers. So in our world, screens are obviously very prevalent, but in a lot of ways they're also necessary, right? So students at school have to have the computer that the school provided for them, or children, I say children, teenagers have to have phones in order to be able to communicate with their parents whenever they go out to football games or to stay with their friends, whatever. The point is, screens are inescapable. Screens are even necessary oftentimes. But the problem comes in when screens begin to be overused and when screens are used beyond the limits of why they should be used. When teenagers form these very unhealthy habits of screen usage, it ultimately leads to, not even limited to, but typically anxiety and depression. So when teens begin to depend on screens, when teens begin to wake up in the mornings, first thing they do, they check their phone, or the last thing they do before they go to sleep is watch YouTube, constantly filling up time throughout the day with screens, this leads to a number of both physical and mental illnesses. It leads to attention deficit disorders, it leads to anxiety and depression, it can lead to obesity, it can lead to a messed up sleep cycle, and ultimately, this is an important issue because it's so relevant to each and every person within our society. So the purpose of my report was just to, exactly what I just said, address the impact of excessive screen time in teenagers and look into those negative side effects and discuss the practical solutions. The goal is to provide and give a possible recommendation that parents and school administrators can implement in order to help avoid overusing screens and form healthy relationships with these screens. So just a few statistics to kind of back up some of the things I'm saying. According to an article by Fabio Duarte, I hope I'm saying that name right, the average teenager spends 7.5 hours nearly on their phone every single day. And that stat is up 2 whole hours from 2015. And that 7 hours and 22 minutes is 43% of the average teenager's day that they spend awake. So basically, the average teen is spending nearly half of their day on either their phone or watching other screens. And this leads to some very serious things, as we've discussed. According to an Adventist Health article, 1 in 3 high school students report that they felt basically depressed or hopeless to the point that it interrupted their day-to-day activities, which is a 40% increase from 2009. And then secondly, anxiety rates have also risen due to this. Nearly half of teens who struggle with anxiety, stress, and depression blame their excessive use of social media. So that shows that there's even students who recognize, or teenagers that recognize they have a problem with screens, yet they don't know how to address it. So there's multiple possible solutions that I discuss in my report. I discuss solutions that parents can implement through making parameters or boundaries for when phones or other screens could be used. I discussed a form of education that could be given to students, whether in middle school or high school, wherever, to help educate students about the negative side effects of screens. And I also discussed the usage of dumb phones, which, as I said in my report, is not necessarily a mass solution, but it could be extremely helpful on an individual basis. And ultimately, the recommendation or the solution that I think would be the most helpful, the most reasonable, and the one that I think would help the most people is implementing some form of education within school systems. So this would practically look like in 6th grade, all students are required to go to a seminar of sorts that is led within the school, and it talks about why phones are used. Because that's something that many teenagers don't get. They're just handed a smartphone with limitless capabilities, and they're never told, hey, this is what you should use your phone for and this is what you shouldn't. And they're also never told the negative side effects. So within this education or this seminar, there would be a time where the negative side effects of overusing screens would be discussed. And then finally, there would obviously be solutions to these problems that would be discussed at this seminar as well. Things like creating healthy habits with screens, having healthy relationships, and even prioritizing important uses of screens. So rather than using the majority of your screen time playing games or on social media, the majority of the screen time would be used towards priorities like communicating with your loved ones or taking care of schoolwork. Overall, my report was just to address the issue of excessive use of screen time in teenagers and try to look into some possible solutions. Thank you.